the corners on this left-hand side of the nail file, we're going to go and take a look at the other sharp corners that we've lost when converting into subdivision surfaces mode. Now, first of all, we're going to come along the top edge and take a look at this one. So if I go out of subdivision surface mode by hitting the Tab key, you'll see we've got this single vertex here that is sitting on this corner on our reference image. And what we want to do is make that vert sit roughly there when we go into subdivision surface mode. And to do that, we need to add in some support edges like we did on the left hand side. Now, first of all, I'm just going to use the edge slice tool to quickly join this up to the bottom, and that'll just make my point a little bit easier to use. So I'm just going to put it on that bottom edge. It doesn't particularly matter where it is for now, and just hit space. Now, if I go to tab mode, if you watch what happens to this vert, you see it's basically zoomed all the way over here. It's being pulled right into kind of this big cluster of verts over there, and that's because there's nothing to stop it moving to the left. So the first thing we're going to do is go out of subdivision surface mode, which I think I'll call tab mode from now on because it'll make it much easier to say. So tab mode. So like this, what we're going to do is add a support edge to the left of this vert. So with the slice tool, which is Shift C, I'm just going to draw an extra edge all the way down like that, and just hit space. Now, for the moment, we're not going to worry about this bottom section. We're just going to concentrate on this top corner. So I'm going to zoom out ever so slightly, and then go into tab mode. And you see that the edge we just added in is now being moved to the left, but this one is now being pulled ever so slightly to the right instead. So it's being pulled towards these guys. So now, as you may have guessed, we need to add an extra edge to the right of it to make sure it doesn't move left or right and stays exactly on that corner. So again, using the Shift tool, which is Shift C, it's going to add in an extra edge down the bottom. And then if we go back to tab mode, you'll see, if I double click the polygons, that we've got this nice corner there now. We've got this vert staying exactly where we want it. And with that done, that's all we're going to do for that one. So we're going to carry on going clockwise around the mesh. So we've got this vert, which I'm going to move down a little bit. So I'm going to follow the background reference image like that. So about there, looks pretty good. And then obviously we've got this problem at the end here. So out of tab mode, we'll take a look at what we've got. We've got this end edge here that we want to stay right at this point on the z-axis, and obviously when we go to tab mode, it's being pulled slightly to the left towards all of these other verts that are quite close to it. So exactly like before, we just need to add an extra support edge to stop it moving left. So slice tool again, which is Shift C, extra edge down the side, and then if we go to tab mode, you'll see that edge is staying exactly where we want it. So if I toggle in and out of tab mode, you'll see that edge stays pretty much still. However, you will notice that this isn't perhaps as sharp as we'd like it to be, and these verts are in fact moving closer to each other on the y-axis. So exactly like we did over here on the left, where we made this little square on the corner by adding these vertical anchor edges and these horizontal edges, we're going to do the exact same thing all the way over here on the right hand side as well. So for this, I'm going to use the edge slice tool, which is just the C key, and for now I'm just going to add in two extra edges. I'm just going to slope this one down at the bottom a little bit to kind of match this bottom edge here. So with these two squares added in, if I now go to tab mode, you'll see that these corners are much kind of more crisp and exactly how we want them. So going back out, we can take a quick look at our reference image, and so we've got this corner where we want it. This curve is now following our reference image nicely, and these two corners are exactly where we want them. However, now we have this big bundle of verts on this bottom edge that isn't following this reference image whatsoever. So instead of grabbing them and kind of moving them around in subdivision surface mode, which sometimes can get you vaguely to where you want, but if you tab out, you'll notice that things aren't very evenly spaced and the curve really doesn't look very curvy. So the best way to do this, I find, is to come out of subdivision surface mode and instead just deal with the raw polygons. And what we're going to do is just grab each of these verts, we're just going to move them slightly into position. And what I'm looking to get here is just an even spacing between them all. So move this one to about there. So I'm just making sure to follow the background ref, and a very roughly even spaced kind of system going on here with these verts. It doesn't need to be exact, but you know, somewhere close is pretty good. So maybe move this one down just a little bit. And with that done, I'm going to go back into tab mode. If I double click, you'll see that we're pretty close on this bottom curve here. What I'm going to do is just grab this edge, and I'm just going to move that slightly. And then I'm going to grab this vert and maybe just tweak it ever so slightly to the left. Now if I double click, you see that this corner, this curve, this far right side, and this curve all look pretty good right now. We do, however, have one or two more things to fix, so I'm going to go in quickly and point out what they are. Now take a look at this vert we've got over here. Now if I go out of tab mode, you'll see that this is in fact the vert that we put down at the very start when we were using the pen tool to mark the transition between this straight edge and the very start of this curve. However, when we go to tab mode, it's being pulled left slightly, which, if I can highlight some of these guys quickly, you'll see is extending this curve. It's not flattening out until it gets to this point now, when in fact we want it pretty much flat by the time it gets to here. So just like over here, just like before, all we need to do is add in an extra support edge to the left of this vert, which will stop it moving left, and it will keep that curve at the length that we want. At the moment, however, we just have some of these floating verts here on this giant multi-sided polygon. So the first thing we're going to do is split that up slightly with the slice tool, which is C. And I'm just going to come in and quickly drag a new edge to the top like that. Now it doesn't particularly matter where it is right now. I'm going to do the same thing, so I'm going to hold down Shift to reinvoke the tool, drag out to this vert, and then pull it up to the top like that. And you'll notice that we've got this big polygon here, and we've got kind of like these kind of smaller ones here. So I'm going to add with the slice tool, so Shift C, I'm going to add a new edge right down the middle of this big polygon, which will help continue this even spacing we have down at the bottom, and that's just nice to get a good polygon flow. Now this is the edge we want to support, so I'm going to use the slice tool to add a new one in to the left of it. But what I'm going to do is, instead of putting it extremely close, I'm actually going to put it at evenly spaced distance away again, so we have this evenly spaced thing going on this bottom edge. And with that in place, I'm going to hit space, and I'm going to go to tab mode again and take a look at what we've got. So I'm going to double click that outer edge, and you can see now that our edge is stopping and becoming flat at this point, which is exactly where we want it. So the side profile of the shape is now done. We obviously have this section here to add, and this is the part where your thumbnail or your fingernail goes in to kind of pull the tool up into position. However, before we do that, we're going to be moving this side profile into position and giving it some width. We can then come back in and edit this into place. With our scene saved, we're now going to move these into position. So I'm going to come out of tab mode, so we get our regular polygons back. I'm going to go to a bottom view, and I'm going to bring back our main segments mesh item by clicking the eye. Now the nail file is actually at 0 on the x-axis, which would be the middle of our knife. So all we have to do is move it ever so slightly to the side. So I'm going to go into Polygons mode, select all of the polygons that make up our nail file, zoom in slightly and activate the move tool. I'm just going to pull this out to the side, leaving a little bit of a gap for our tool to rotate. Then I'm going to activate the extrude tool with X, right click to activate it, and pull this out to the other side, which gives our nail file some width. Remember to leave a little bit of a gap on the other side as well, but when you're happy, space to drop the tool. And if I go back to perspective mode and hide our main segments layer, you'll see that our nail file now has the exact right width that we're looking for. Now at some point along the way my grid has come back, so I'm going to quickly turn that off by coming up to Shaded, Visibility Options, and click on Show Grid. And then we're going to take a look to see what our nail file with its new width looks like in tab mode. So hit tab, and you'll see something that looks, I don't know, a bit like a weird fish or something, I suppose. Doesn't look pretty much exactly like we want it, does it? So why is this happening? Well, if we take a look at the top quickly, you'll see that we've got this big curve going across the top here. It's not flat at all. And if we investigate that by going out of tab mode, you might be able to see why. This top set of polygons that runs actually all the way around our model doesn't have any support edges whatsoever. This was the new extrude that we just created, so we haven't gone in yet and added in these edges. So when we hit tab, these guys are moving towards these guys. They're all being pulled in slightly towards the middle, and Modo is going in and adding extra detail to make this a kind of curved edge. At the same time, these are moving down into the model, as we don't have any support edges underneath them either. So to fix this, obviously we need to go in and add in some support edges. So the first thing to do would be to add them to this outer set of quads. So I'm going to grab one of these edges, hit Alt-C for the loop slice tool, and with our mode set to symmetry and our count set to 2, I'm going to right click in our viewport, and then you can drag left and right with your left mouse button held down to kind of position them. And what I'm going to do is come in onto this corner, and I'm just going to get these polygons roughly square, so something around about that. And essentially, the closer these edges are to this side, the more tight these kind of corners will be, the more kind of close together all the verts will be when you go into subdivision surface mode. So here it looks to be good. You don't want to overdo it too much and get these really close together because you might get some shading artifacts and things like that. So a good distance is about this, I think. So with that done, we're going to go back into tab mode, and you'll see that we're getting there. It's looking a little bit better, much less fish-like, which is always a good thing for a knife. So we're going to go in and add the extra edges that we need. So back out of tab mode, you'll see that at the front here, and at the back as well, in fact, when we created these hard corners, we actually added in these extra edge loops as well. These have obviously been extruded along the width of the model. So what we could do is, using the edge slice tool, we could extend these edges all the way around the model, and in doing so we can add an extra edge to support these and keep them where we want them. So with the edge slice tool, I'm going to come in and start cutting out some edges. Before we do, however, you'll notice that we've probably got quite a few edges to cut here, and instead of doing it twice, one for each side of the model, it would be great to come in and use symmetry mode. Now remember, to use symmetry, our model or our current mesh needs to be in the exact center of an axis. In this case it would be the x-axis. So I'm just going to go to poly mode, double click our entire mesh to select all of our polygons, come up to the basic tab and click on center selected X. And although this hasn't noticeably moved, it might have moved a tiny little bit, and that would be enough to throw off our symmetry. Now that we know this is on the center, we can come up to symmetry and turn on X, and hopefully when we add in some edges on one side, they'll be put on the other side as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is go in with the edge slice tool, so that's C on your keyboard. We're just going to pull in some of these edges. Now the first thing you'll notice is that there's no edge to go to here. We've got a corner running along our model, but there's no extra edge that we can pull up and down to put an extra vertex on. However, Modo does take care of that, and as long as your inside polygons option is turned on down here, you can actually click in the middle of a polygon where there isn't any edges whatsoever and leave an extra vert. And this is a very, very useful thing that I do all of the time, especially in circumstances like this when you've got this giant n-gon and no edge to connect to. So what I'm going to do is grab this extra vert. I'm just going to pull it up so it would be pretty much where we'd want it if there was an edge here, and that's kind of following the angle of this curve here. So we're kind of going down towards the angle of this corner. I'm going to leave it there, and then I'm going to pull up onto this edge, then this edge, and this one. And I'm going to come along a little bit and do the same thing to here, here, and here. And they don't need to be exactly perfectly in line, to be honest. I mean, if you get them vaguely close, you can always watch the percentage as you pull out these points. So, 96.5 is pretty good. And then if we come all the way to this other end, what we can do is connect it up to this top one. So make sure we've got 100%, so that's right on top of each other, and then hit space to drop the tool. And you'll see with symmetry on, our edges have been created on the other side as well. Now if we go back to the very front of the model, you'll see that we actually have the same situation with this n-gon here. If I was to come in with the edge slice tool, there's no edge to connect this to, so instead I'm going to come in and just click where we want it. So about there looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom on to this edge. Now before we go on and continue this around the model, I'm going to zoom in a little bit and take a look at what we've got. Now you'll see that we've created, in putting this extra vert there, this polygon here, which is actually a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sided polygon. Now what we could do with the edge slice tool is to connect up those two middle verts to convert it into two quads. And this is a really good thing that you can do. Now, if we go into tab mode quickly, you'll see that where I've connected that up into two quads, which are in fact these two quads at the moment, we've got no smoothing issues down here at all. However, where we had that at the top and we didn't connect it, you see our mesh has gone a little bit haywire. So, out of tab, I'm just going to fill in that extra edge to convert this six-sided polygon into two quads. And then if we go back to tab mode, things start looking a little bit better again. Now, why isn't this large n-gon causing any smoothing problems? It's because at the moment we've got these edges surrounding these inner faces, and as long as you have an extra row of polygons surrounding your inner faces, these inner faces won't really affect the smoothing of the mesh at all. So you can avoid those nasty little smoothing errors we saw up there. So with this done, I'm going to come down, C for the edge slice tool, and we're just going to continue around the bottom of the mesh like this. So a couple more. So about 97, 96.5, something like that. Ooh, 3. Okay, so we went to the other end, so just eyeball it really is pretty good. So all the way to the other end, and then slam it down onto that one. So we've got this edge loop now that runs all the way along the bottom of the model. So with our new edges added in, I'm just going to add in one more just to split this n-gon up into two quads. Switch the edge slice tool. I'm just going to draw in the edge there. And obviously symmetry is still on, so it's on the other side as well. And with all of our new edges in, I'm going to hit tab to see what happens. And you can see that our nail file actually looks like it should now. We have these nice kind of tight edges up the top here, nice kind of crisp creases all the way around our model. We've got our curves that were in our side profile exactly as we want them, and everything's looking pretty good. So the only issues we have now are these n-gons, which are on both sides. However, to clean those up, we're going to have to address the one big thing we have left to do, which is adding in this bit of detail here. Now this is actually the part where your thumbnail or your fingernail goes into to kind of pull the tool up into position, and it's only on one side, it's only on this side of the model that we can see. So to begin with, I'm going to go out of tab mode by hitting tab, so we just have our regular polygons back. And then you can see at the moment we have this large set of quad polygons here that kind of overlap this detail a little bit. And that's fine, we could work with that. However, what I'd like to do is separate the part that we don't want to work on from the part that we do. And to do that, I'm going to use the slice tool. I'm just going to drag an extra edge just down there like that. So now we have this kind of middle set of polygons here which we can use to create this detail. Now, as I said before, it's only on one side, and it's basically an indent beveled in to the mesh. However, we're going to have to take into account the fact that we're using subdivision surfaces, and the best way I think of doing this is the following. The first thing I'm going to do is delete these 4 polygons. So I'm just going to select them and hit delete, like that. I'm then going to go in and draw out this shape using the pen tool. So in the same layer, in the nail file layer, I'll come up to the basic tab and click on the pen tool. And what I'm going to do is put a point on the corner like that. I'm going to put one there, one in the middle, maybe pull this one back a little bit, make it a little bit more evenly spaced, and then another one in the middle and one on the far edge like that. Now we're going to tweak these in a minute, so it doesn't have to be too precise. But something like that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. I'm then going to go into tab mode and see what this looks like. So in tab mode you can see that we end up with this tiny little kind of capsule shape in the middle that obviously doesn't follow the shape of our background. So just like before, we need to go in and add in some support edges. So I'm going to deselect and hit tab again to come out of tab mode. The first thing I'm going to do is add an extra vert on each of these corners. I'm going to do that by using the edge slice tool, just by cutting an edge across like that, something around there. Then I'm just going to move that edge up a little bit, just like that, to try and maintain this curve here. And I'll do the same on the other side. I'll grab this vert and move it ever so slightly up so it follows this reference curve like that. Now in doing this, we add an extra vert on this corner, so it's kind of more weight pulling this part of the mesh down into this position here. However, as you can see, we have no support edges going this way at present, so these verts, if I go to tab mode, get pulled in towards the middle. So we want to stop that from happening as well. So what I'm going to do is come in and add an extra edge like that, and do the same on the other side. So we have this square and this square here. And if I go to tab now, you'll see that we've got these points exactly where we want them. It's just the rest of this object that we now have to figure out. So I'm going to go back out of tab again. There's a lot of toggling with this, but essentially what we want to do is split this now up into quads. And the first part is to use the edge slice tool to draw an extra edge just down the middle, like that. And I'm going to do the same here, draw an edge down to that bottom edge, and here as well. And then we only have to deal with these bottom these side polygons here. Now at the moment you'll see that this is actually a quad. It has 4 vertices making it up. So let's take a look what happens when we go to subdivision mode. So tab, and you'll see that things are actually not looking too bad. They're looking pretty good. So I think for now what we're going to do, we'll leave them like that. And then if needs be, we can come in and tweak them a little bit later. Now as you can see, we're obviously not following the ref perfectly here, so I'm going to grab this edge and just pull that up a little bit. Double click, and we'll do the same thing over here. So I'm just double clicking the mesh after I move it just to see really what's going on. That's pretty close. I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. So with that done, I can now hit space to drop the tool, and I'm going to hit the tab key to go back into non-subdivision surface mode. With that done, I'm going to come up and quickly hide our all refs group, which will just make things a little bit easier to see. Now we obviously need to fill in this gap to join these two objects together. However, before we do, I'm just going to make sure that this section here is actually in line with the side polygons of our main nail file. So I'm going to come up into perspective view and start moving these out into position. So I'm going to move these a little bit of the way, and you'll notice that with the move tool activated, and even though I'm moving it on the X here, the polygons we have selected aren't moving at all, and that's because we have symmetry X on. Now at the moment, when I'm moving say 3 units this way, symmetry is making these move 3 units the other way as well, so they cancel each other out and it's not moving at all. So to rectify it, I'm going to hit space to drop the move tool, come up to symmetry and turn it off like that. I can then grab these with the move tool and move them into position. So with them selected and then moved out slightly to the side that we want, I'm going to go to the top view and then just bring it back so they sit right on top of those polygons just there. So you want this to be as close as you can get it. So about there looks pretty good. Now I suspect because we had symmetry on when I deleted these polygons, yeah, we've also got a massive hole on this side as well that I'm going to quickly fill in. So I'm going to select these 4 edges and select these bottom edges as well. Ooh, not that one. So we have 8 edges in total. I'm going to come to the edge menu, click on the bridge tool and right click, and that will fill in that hole with these quad polygons. Now back to our other side, we're going to take a look at filling in this gap here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is look for the obvious polygons that we can make, and it seems like we could quickly connect up these edges here with 2 quad polygons. So I'm going to select them, hit the bridge tool and right click to activate. Now you can see it's kind of skewing off to the right slightly, and these verts up here actually aren't supporting anything at all. They were basically just the top part of this bottom area here, which was the bottom of this curve. So we're free to move these on the Z axis as much as we want. So with them selected, I'm just going to move them a little bit closer so they're pretty much straight above the verts that we're connecting to, like that. And about there, I think. Looks pretty good. Now these ones down here we can't move because they're the equally spaced verts that make up the bottom of this curve. So with them in position, I'm going to grab both of these edges and these guys and just bridge those together. And then we can go in and double click this loop and hit the P key, which will fill that with a poly. Double click this one and fill that with a poly as well. Now with both of these filled, all we have to do is go in with the edge slice tool and split them up. So let's take a quick look at what we've got. Now I'm just going to experiment with the edge slice tool to see kind of what flows really work for this model. Now by the looks of things, we can create a quick quad up there and one down here as well. And then we have this rather awkward looking polygon here. So what I'm going to do is actually make a try just on that corner, and this leaves us with this quad here, which is, although a little bit unusually shaped, it should be okay. And then if we go to the left of this detail, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add in this big edge at the top, add one down the bottom, and then probably just put in that try there as well, and then we get a slightly less awkward looking shape right on the far side. Now if I go into tab mode, you'll see that we can't really make out our detail. It's actually these polygons here, but Modo is kind of warping them out of shape, so it doesn't really look like the object that we had. But don't panic. With these selected, I'm going to delete them and have a look at the shape of the hole that we're left with. Perfect. So the shape of the hole that we're left with exactly matches, if I go to right and turn on our all refs group, the shape of the kind of indent that we want to add to our model. And this is a brilliant starting point for adding this in. Now we know that this shape is maintained when we connect it to the main body. I'm going to go in and have another quick look at this right corner here to see if we can cut that up into something that looks a little bit better. So I'm going to deselect these edges and hit tab to go back to our regular polygon mode. Now let's see, what I think we should do is get rid of this guy here and drag an edge from there to there and get rid of this one. So we have a quad down there now. We now have this big n-gon to deal with, but what I'm going to do is drag a new edge from this top one here across and up to this point, like so. Now at the moment we now have a quad, 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 quad and quad around the corner of our hole, whereas we have a try up here. However, this is okay. I mean, a try at this point, because it's surrounded by this outer row of polygons that we added in, it's not going to affect the smoothing of our shape at all. So if we go into perspective mode and go to tab mode, you can see that everything is still looking okay, and the corner of this now looks a lot better in terms of polyflow. Now before we do anything, I'm going to add in an extra row of polygons surrounding this hole that we've just created, and just like these ones at the bottom and these ones at the top of our object, they will help avoid any smoothing errors that we might have when we start beveling this into the middle of our object. So I'm going to go out of tab mode, and with the edge slice tool I'm just going to come in and start drawing in some extra edges. Now you'll notice that here we've got these two which have created this try. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit space to drop this new edge. I'm going to grab both of these verts, come to the vertex tab and click join averaged. And that just gives us these two quads here, and it makes these kind of polygons all join up into one vert. Now if we wanted to move this slightly, we can do so as long as we don't move it on the x-axis, as that will start giving us these little nasty smoothing errors here. So instead of moving it with any of the arrows, you can move it with this red circle, and that ensures that it only moves on the z-axis and the y-axis. So I'm just going to move that out so it's a little bit more evenly spaced there. Then I'm going to drop the tool, C for the edge slice tool, and making sure that we deselect that vert, I'm just going to carry on adding in this edge all the way around. Now like before, it doesn't need to be perfect. I mean, the neater the better with this, but it doesn't have to be an exact distance from the edge, so just get it roughly correct. And about there looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to quickly come down and grab this vert, activate the move tool, and again with the red circle I'm just going to drag that out slightly to make this a little bit more evenly spaced. Now I'm going to drop the tool and deselect the vert, hit tab to make sure that everything is still looking as it should do and everything looks fine, and we can now go in and start beveling this into the middle of the model. So I'm going to switch out of tab mode and we're going to fill in these polygons again. So I'm going to double click this edge loop and hit P to fill that in. I'm going to deselect the edge, and then with the edge slice tool I'm just going to fill in these middle joins like that. Then if you remember, we had an edge running horizontally across it, so I'm going to add that in. And then we need to quickly drag an extra edge up like that, which gives us this quad polygon here. So I'm going to do that on the other side. So remembering to deselect that polygon before you start doing your edge slices. Let's bring that guy up to there. and then everything is as it should be. So I'm going to grab all of these middle polys, being sure not to select any that are in this outer loop, and we're going to start beveling these into position. So with the B key, I'm going to right click to activate it, and we're just going to quickly bevel this in a little bit, being sure to watch the end to make sure that nothing is overlapping or doing anything particularly ugly. Everything looks okay there. I'm going to pull this in slightly and then shift click to reactivate, pull it in a little bit further, and then instead of beveling it in, I'm going to use the scale tool to scale this down to the correct size. So I'm just using the individual handles to get this into roughly the correct position. And that looks pretty good. I think from a side view, you want this to be pretty much equidistant from the top and the bottom, and then you just want to maintain a roughly equal gap to this top edge there. And if you do that, these corner sections will kind of sort themselves out a little bit. But that looks pretty good to me. Now let's see what happens when we hit tab. We get our nice indent there, but the very inside of it is perhaps a little bit too curved for my liking. This should be a hard edge in here, and at the moment it's really not. It's curving up and back around. So what we're going to do is go in and add in some extra edges. Now I'm going to add one in using the loop slice tool. I'm just going to select one of these edges, Alt C for the loop slice tool, and with the mode set to free and the count set to 1, I'm going to right click and just drag it relatively close to this side like that, and then you can hit space to drop the tool, go back to tab mode, and you can see that this is now much sharper in here. So we now have one last thing that we need to do, and that is to take care of both of these n-gons that we have here. So I'm going to go to regular mode, come out of tab mode, and you'll see that both of these are the same on both sides, so we can quickly turn symmetry onto the X. And all I'm going to do is drag an edge from this top vert of this inner edge here to this very top corner over here, and that gives us these two quads. I'm going to quickly go to tab mode to make sure that that looks okay, and it does. The polyflow is not ideal here, but that looks okay, it works. So I'm going to quickly come over to the list tab, come down to polygons by vertex, and just check that we've got no polygons with more than 4 verts, and we haven't. And with that done, we now have completed our nail file. So I'm going to bring back our needle threader, and also our main side plate and main segments and our blocks, and we can start taking a look at how our knife is coming together. And it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this so far. It's looking nicely technical, which is something I always look out for in my models. In fact, I'm going to come up to shaded quickly, come down to visibility options, and I'm going to turn off show vertices. Now just make things a little bit easier to see. So we now have these two items. We have the needle threader that was created using entirely polygonal modeling techniques with no subdivision surfaces whatsoever. We also have the nail file, which was created using entirely subdivision surface techniques. So why would you use one over the other, and what are the benefits and what are the negatives of using subdivision surfaces? Well, if I come up and hide these other layers and concentrate on our nail file for a second, just going to hit Shift A to frame that up. We had this bottom curve here, and we created it in subdivision surface mode by adding in about 7 or 8 different verts. If we weren't using subdivision surface mode, to get this level of kind of smoothness, to get this level of quality so that it will look this good on our final render, we would probably have to add in 24, maybe 30 edges onto this bottom curve, and to get those straight and so that they all perfectly flowed into the next one would be quite a task. The same is true obviously of this top edge here. You'd have to add in a whole bunch of extra detail if you weren't using subdivision surface. Now the downside, for me at least, is poly count. Modo is going in and using these verts that we've put down. It's adding in extra detail for us. It's kind of saying, the verts that you've put down is going to guide Modo to create this extra detail, and it is creating that extra detail uniformly over the entire mesh. You can't just come in and say, I want to create extra detail on this top corner here, and then the rest just to be normal. It doesn't quite work like that. So this entire mesh is being subdivided, if we look in our properties, with a subdivision level of 2. It's at this point I'm going to introduce you to another tool, and that's over here in the Mesh Edit menu under the Subdivide command, and it's called the SDS Subdivide or Subdivision Surface Subdivide, and it's an extremely useful tool. Now, when I was talking about subdivision surfaces earlier, I said that when you hit Tab to go into subdivision surface mode, Modo adds in the extra detail behind the scenes. This extra detail to make these curves as smooth as they are is not editable by the user. You can't go in there and say, oh, this is good, but I'd like kind of the middle of this bit to be taller. To get that change, you'd have to come in and physically add in extra detail. So all of the things that Modo are adding in to the mesh, all of the extra polygons, extra edges, and the extra verts cannot be edited by you. That's in the normal tab mode. Using SDS Subdivide, however, gets you access to those verts, to those polygons that Modo is creating behind the scenes. However, it is not a toggle option. If you hit SDS Subdivide, that's it, your mesh is subdivided. You can still undo, but anything you've done after the subdivide will have to be undone as well. So it's a good thing to remember, but it's a very, very useful tool to use. Now, to quickly show you what it does, I'm going to go down to a subdivision level of 1. I'm going to turn off our needle threader just quickly. And I'm currently in subdivision surface mode, and you'll see if we take a look at this curve here, it is still quite blocky because we're only at a subdivision level of 1. But what I want you to take notice of is the amount of segments of this curve that Modo has created for us. Now you can see there's kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 segments on this curve now with a subdivision level of 1. Now if I go out of tub mode and hit subdivide SDS Subdivide once and go and look at the side again, we have those same 4 segments that we had a minute ago, except now we can go in and edit all of these edges, verts, and polygons. So the SDS Subdivide gives you access to the polygons that Modo is creating behind the scene. Now we originally had a subdivision level of 2 for our nail file object, so I need to come in and subdivide one more time using the SDS Subdivide command. So I'm going to click that once more. With that done, I can come in and double click our mesh in poly mode, and you can see down here that we have 4,136 polygons that make up our nail file object, and that is a whole bunch of polygons. In fact, if you take a look at our needle threader layer, it's only 264 polygons in total. Now admittedly our nail file has this extra curve detail and also this extra section here, but I don't think that's going to be worth the extra 4,000 polygons. So the technique that I want to introduce you to is essentially combining these two methods. You get the ease of use of subdivision surfaces to create the more complex curved shapes, but you then take those shapes, use the SDS Subdivide to kind of bake out the geometry that Modo is creating for you, and then you can add that in to a more polygonal mesh to ensure that you use as fewer polys as possible in your final object. Before we move on, however, I'm just going to undo several times until our nail file returns to its original shape, like this, because we want to keep this guy as a subdivision surface instead of the subdivided mesh that we had a second ago. So with that done, I'm going to quickly come up and save our scene. So file, save as, I'm going to save this as 6, nail file, done, and hit save. So we're now going to go ahead and create one of the other tools on the bottom of the penknife. So I'm going to come up here to our all refs group, toggle down our set 3 refs, we're going to turn off nail file right, and we're going to turn on pokey thing right. Okay, I have no idea what this tool does. It is essentially a point. It's one of the tools I've never used before, so I mean, if you know, leave it in the comments, let me know, because you know, it might be something I'm missing out on, who knows. But anyway, set 3 pokey thing right is now turned on. We're going to go down and turn off our nail file and create a new mesh item, which I'm going to drop into our bottom tools group and rename to pokey thing, and hit enter. So we have our pokey thing layer, which is overly descriptive. Anyway, so I'm going to go to our right view to take a look at our reference. Now this is actually a very, very simple object to create. It is really all straight lines. We have a very slight corner there, then this is a straight line. This is obviously a slightly rounded corner, then this is a straight line as well. So basically with our pokey thing layer selected, I'm going to come to basic and click on the pen tool. I'm just going to do exactly the same as before. We're just going to draw out all of these points as needed. Now the point here I'm going to put so it is in the middle of that curve, and the same here. This one's pretty much actually at 0 on the z-axis, so I'm just going to drop that to there, and drop that one to there. And then when you're done, you can hit space to drop the tool. I'm going to select this edge, go to scale, and with negative scale turned off, I'm going to slam that down on the Z. Select this one and slam it down on the Y. I'm going to slam this one down on the Y as well, and this one as well. And then finally, this very end one, we're going to even out on the Z-axis like that. Now I'm just going to go in and see if we need to tweak these at all. It actually seems to be in pretty good, much kind of the right position there. This one as well, actually, so we've done pretty good with that. Maybe this could be moved just ever so slightly that way. Now what I'm going to do is grab this vert, I'm going to go to bevel, and we're just going to add in some extra edges there. Now I turned off show vertices, so I'm going to turn that back on again by coming up to visibility options even, and show vertices. And then we can kind of see the amount of detail that we've got on that corner. And round level of 3 looks pretty good to me, so about there. I'm going to do the same thing on this vert, so bevel, and I think only a round level of 2 for this one, as it's a much shallower curve. So something like that looks pretty good. Then I'm going to come to grab both of these verts, and I'm going to bevel those guys with a round level of 0. We're going to round these out to about 64, so something like that. And then I'm going to grab these 4 as well and go to the same amount. So vertex bevel to about there, I think. Probably. Actually, let's make these a little bit bigger. So let's take these up to 200. Like that. So exactly like before, we've now got our side profile created, which we're going to move into position and then extrude to give us the width. So I'm going to go to a bottom view and bring back our segments. Now this tool is actually just to the left of the middle, so I'm going to bring up the move tool and we're going to move it into position. Again, it's not going to move because I've got symmetry X turned on, so I'm going to turn that guy off and then we can drag this out into position. So remember to leave a little space. I'm going to hit X, right click to activate, and drag this out like that. I'll then go back into perspective mode and hit space to drop the tool. I'll then hide our main segments. Now the first thing we're going to do is ever so slightly inset this guy. So I'm going to grab both of these side polygons, activate the bevel tool, and right click to activate. I'm then going to use the red handle just to inset us a tiny little bit to about there, which will add in this extra row of polygons surrounding these side faces. Now we might have to do a little bit of cleanup. You see we've got some crossing over verts at the end here. So what I'm going to do is grab both of those guys and come to vertex and click join averaged and then hit enter on my keyboard. And then do the same on those two, join averaged and hit enter. Same on the other side, grab these two, join averaged even, and hit enter. And then the same on this one as well. And that gives us these tries on the corner that makes things nice and gives us this lovely row of polygons surrounding our side faces. Now I'm just going to quickly check out this end that everything is looking good and everything seems to be okay. So I'm now going to grab both of these edge loops running along the side of our model, and we're going to bevel these edges as well. So with B, I'm going to right click and just drag out a little edge bevel like that. So about 100 is pretty good. So space to drop the tool. Now all that remains is to split this up into quads, and also if I go back into the right view, we have to add in our little indent here for our thumbnail. And it's for that part that we're going to be using the mix of subdivision surfaces and polygonal modeling. And we're going to do that in the next video. So I'll see you guys in a second.